And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and on these programs, I could sit here for the next 2 minutes and give you all the particulars that I normally do on most every other program, but there are programs, there are guests that you just want to get to like now, or as they say, yesterday. Today, we're going to be talking with a woman who has a very interesting background, and we want to find out more about it, especially under the category with the metaphysical and spiritual aspects of this program, New Paradigms for a New World, and looking for those choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. The healing, the wellness, the taking care of yourself. Actually, the key, I guess a current phrase that's really being used is self-care. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, well, probably a lot about that, with our very special guest, Rachel Mann, Ph.D. She is a shaman, a peacemaker, activist, and I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Well, thank you, Richard. It is such a pleasure. I am so excited to be here and to speak with you. I love your energy. I love your show. And yeah, and I love your hat.
Mike, I thank you. A lot of folks do. I think what I'm going to have to do is contact the manufacturer and say, look, if you'll be a sponsor and provide me with hats that I can send out to my guests who want them. There's an idea, right?
There you go.
You are, now, it's interesting because I've spoken with many shamans. And each one of them has a different way of describing themselves or titling themselves, if you will. And then there are those who say, I don't want any title. You know, I just do what I do. It just happens to be shamanism. What would you say? You're a shamanic healer, practitioner, shaman woman, medicine woman. What fits and resonates with you that when you decided to go down this path?
Okay, well, I will start by saying that I call myself, take a deep breath, a sacred activist, social scientist, shamanic healer, and spiritual teacher. So I prefer not to call myself a shaman. I call myself, if I'm going to describe that aspect of my way, my spiritual way, I will say I'm a shamanic practitioner, shamanic healer, and as I said, a spiritual teacher. You know, in some ways, I think that I'm increasingly beginning to feel as if I'll just say that I met my first Native American teacher back in my early 30s. So we're talking 30 years ago. And never did I even imagine back then that I'd be doing what I am now. And then, you know, despite my confusion and doubts about how I, a white woman of European ancestry, could possibly be walking this luminous, illuminated spiritual path that is, you know, that was, you know, what I was introduced to through my Cherokee teacher, but then later other Native American teachers, and then eventually through the Q'ero people of the Andes in Peru, the medicine people, the Andes in Peru, and their beautiful cosmology. But so that's what I call myself. I sometimes call it, if I'm going to really try to describe it to people, I sometimes will call it an earth-inspired, heart-grounded, soul-awakening, spirit-shaking kind of path of personal revelation, where we come into, you know, where we build our natural communion with all of Mother Earth and all our relations, the rock stone people, tree plant people, all beings that walk, swim, crawl, fly, and creep, and the powers and elements and forces of nature, and with the great cosmic beings of light and our cosmic divine parents, creator spirit, by whatever name we may call. So that's what I do, and that's how I talk about what I do.
I'm going to share something with you real quick here because I noticed in a photograph on your website, you are wearing a turquoise, I'll call it a talisman. And
Yeah.
I happen to have something quite similar to that. I don't know
Oh,
how well you'll
yeah.
see that. It's much smaller than yours.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I actually purchased this in Arizona when my wife and I were traveling at Christmas 2019, right before the lockdown, and I just really felt, led to have
Yeah.
here. You are also a sacred activist for peacemaking. How is being a sacred activist, and this is the first time I've heard of a sacred activist, let alone for peacemaking, because I've seen a lot of activists out on the streets protesting and so forth, and I've never really felt initially that protesting really solved anything. It never seemed to really do anything, that it only seemed to antagonize those people who didn't want what these people were protesting. How is it? How do you define being a sacred activist as opposed to just a regular run of the mill?
Yeah, that's a great question, Richard. So let me give you a little bit of backstory from my life in order to understand how I came to use this moniker, you might call it, or name, or role. I don't know what you would call it. So I've been very, very concerned ever since I was a child about war and violence. And indeed, it seemed throughout my life that my work, I was drawn to work. As an academic, I actually became very fascinated with the former Soviet Union and Russia when I was 15, 16 years old. And then I went on to get a BA during Cold War. I got a BA in Russian studies and an MA in Soviet studies and a PhD in Slavic languages and literatures. But what I was fundamentally researching and studying through all those years of education was I was studying the effects first of authoritarian dictatorships on individuals and on, the community, you might call the people of Russia and the Soviet Union. And but even back then, when I was doing this work, and I was involved in a variety of different things. I was the translator for the Soviet American Youth Orchestra, which was one of the many cultural exchanges that had been set up by the USIA during the Cold War. I always really felt like, on some level, that it was a spiritual mission, that my seeking to understand Russia and Russians and the history was in a way a spiritual mission, and that in so doing it would be breaking down whatever the stereotypes and barriers and fear that was being stoked during the Cold War, right, between these two so-called superpowers. And I also, really from childhood again, was very concerned about racism in the United States. And it's still one of my passions. I mean, really, basically, my passion is for human rights, essentially, and human well-being. And within that, I look at the traumatic impact from war, genocide, authoritarianism, and all the manifestations, the way this system that we live in the world, really can really wound people, and I've been involved as an activist in a variety of ways, as an educator, as an academic, dealing with racism and prejudice in the workplace. And So, I finally came to this idea or this feeling. So within all of this activism, I also worked with the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance on getting grants for this amazing program of poetry, paintings, and personal narratives by survivors of sexual assault called The Art of Surviving. And within, through, and around all of this, I was always bringing a spiritual way of being, that we have to do our inner work, right? And that doing our inner work is actually an act of activism. So if you think about activism as being like, I'm going to take an action that is going to have a positive and powerful ripple effect out into the world to make people's lives better, to heal people, to make people more loving, more caring, more compassionate towards one another, right? Which I think is really at the heart of true activism. Then that really is sacred. And then when you bring into that this healing intention, because I am a healer, if you bring into that this healing intention first to do your own inner work, to heal whatever traumas, wounds you're carrying that are yours, that are in your family lineage, right? Your ancestral lineage. That, and you ground into a practice of building the vibrational frequency of compassion and peace within yourself, that you are a sacred activist. So that's kind of the bigger picture, the framework for that. Mm-hmm. And I feel that energy healing in particular is a very critical piece in terms of helping the world, because I believe that, economic, political, psychological, scientific, economic ways of trying to make people's lives better are valuable. And I think that when paired with with an understanding that we are energetic beings and that we're going to work energetically as well, is very potent. And yes, I think that one of the things I follow in the footsteps of Gandhi, for instance, where he did basically bring nonviolent, peaceful protests into the human imagination. But for him, because of his deep spiritual practice in Hinduism, he very much believed and told each person who was going to be doing that marching was that they had to really be grounded in that energy of peace. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We are talking with Rachel Mann, PhD. RachelMannPhD.com is the website. She is a peacemaker. We're going to talk more about that as a sacred activist, as well as a shaman here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I am really, really glad that we have Rachel Mann here on the program with us to talk about the work that she is doing that is working towards, and I've said this maybe thousands of times, as far as I know, on this program, that we are looking for those new ways of living because the old ways don't work. How do I know this? Look around. They aren't working because there are so many people who are hurting, who are I cannot believe the number one of homeless people, the number of hurting people who do not have a community for whatever reason, by their own choice or by their family's choice, because they chose a path their family didn't want them to choose. Rachel, I just went through, well, I guess it's ongoing. It never really ends. A period where I experienced for the first time in this lifetime for me, the loss of a sibling, my eldest sister, back on the 29th of March, 2022. And went back to Phoenix to spend the time to go to the memorial of my sister. I am very grateful, by the way, my brother-in-law because from the day I met him over 40 years ago, when they first met and started going out, he had a camera around his neck. So he has thousands and thousands of pictures, not only of her, of them, of the places that they traveled, of his daughter, their granddaughter and grandson, and so on and so forth. And so they had a beautiful slide presentation, if you will, or what have you, slideshow.
Yeah.
And what it said to me more than anything else, and you alluded to this just a little bit ago, is how important it was to both of them, as well as to their daughter. They obviously sort of infused this into her life, and hopefully she does the same with her children. I'm sure she will. Is the importance of community. As I was just saying, there are people out there that have been somehow, the old thing about, no child left behind. Well, all right, fine, you're not leaving the kids behind, but there are millions of adults who are being left behind, and some children too, and they don't have to be. And I wonder if there is there a connection for you with those people who we might say they are alone. They're not. Being lonely is one thing. I mean, there are times when we want to be alone. We need that downtime, right?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
But there are people out there that their downtime is almost permanent because they have nobody to turn to. They don't have a net, a security blanket, if you will, of any kind.
Yeah.
And it's up to their own devices, if you will, and some of them will turn to all kinds of different things. Can we talk a little bit about the process of healing this aloneness and the loneliness? And is there anything within your medicine wheel, if I may use that term, that you use to help people? And again, we don't take away people's free will. I understand that. But to give them the awareness that they aren't alone and that they don't have to be if they don't want to be, if they want that connection. And I know that for many people who are listening, they've been alone for 2 years, obviously, in many different cases.
Yes,
Talk
absolutely.
to us a little bit about that if you can, please.
Wow, that's a big question. And let me give you certainly my condolences about your sister. So I know that's really tough.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, I hear that is where your passion lies. And of course, I mean, one of my indigenous teachers from the Andes, and this is not something he said to me. This is something that his friend who wrote a book about him said in the book about him. This is J.E. Williams, the book, I think it was Light of the Andes, talked about Sebastian. And, Sebastian, who had grown up in the high Andes, in the Q'ero villages, the indigenous nation of the Q'ero, this is all outside and around Cusco in Peru. And of course, they live up there. The Q'ero have lived there in, very intact communities, right? With extended family and neighbors and friends, and planting the fields together and living in this way that, indigenous peoples, of course, have lived for millennia. Human beings have lived throughout our existence on Earth, which of course is not true in the westernized world any longer. And certainly what you're talking about is showing how sick the system is. And so first, I would say absolutely, if you and I today talking to you can get out the message that whatever pain and hurt you are carrying inside that makes you feel alone, certainly there is lots of help out there. I mean, I'm a healer. There are many healers out there. lots of different kinds of help, that there is no shame in reaching out for help. I think that there still is sort of a feeling that people have that it's somehow shameful to want help and to reach out for help. And one of the things about carrying a lot of trauma anyway, one of the woundings of it can be to feel very isolated and alone. So I really talk a lot about how unhealed wounds can really, really exacerbate that feeling of aloneness. And then, of course, we are encouraged in the westernized world that we are given a story that we are these singular units and that we have to be self-sufficient. And that's a wound in and of itself, right? I would say that one of the things that I do in my spiritual practice that is extremely important. So even if I'm doing an energy healing for a single person, or if I'm doing a ceremony with a group of people, and always and ever the intention for the ceremony, the intention for the healing is not just to help those present, it's not just to help ourselves, but it's always, always offered as being of service of our family, our community, our nation, our world, so that that vibrational frequency of healing and the peace that can come from it and the feeling of connection will resonate outward, right? And of course, in doing that, the hope is that if there's just one person out there who is lonely and isolated and hurting, that something will happen, a synchronicity, or something in their mind and heart will wake up and they'll reach for the phone to reach out for help, right? And of course, part of it is also the desire to heal our families, because all of our families, many of our families are so broken. And I'm not just talking about from divorce or things like that. I'm just talking about dysfunctional, unhealthy, difficult patterns that just keep getting played out, right? That are wounding. And so that is an act of sacred activism, to just send that prayer out. And then, of course, then it's like, where is if you want to go more into action in terms of stepping up to be an activist or to be of service, which is really a better way of putting it, right? Where is your heart called to help? Is it called to help the homeless? Is it called to help elderly people who are isolated in their homes? A lot of people during COVID being in isolation have waken up to the fact that they're being called to be in service in some way, in some more greater way, more active way than they have been. They want their work, their spiritual way of being, and whatever they've gotten from their own healing journey to then be able to offer it to the world, to others, in some way that is unique and authentic to who they are. I hope that answers the question. I can't hear you, Richard.
It also opens up an experience that I had back in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Wonderful conversations with my three other sisters, with my mother, my father.
Yeah.
Most fascinating conversation with my brother. And it was one of those conversations that in other families, under other circumstances, would have divided. We would have become estranged siblings.
Yeah.
But we continued talking right up until, and I say this because it's actually a humorous a moment, when my mother comes out of the bedroom and says, "Boys, I'm 61, he's 59. Boys, it's 1 o'clock in the morning." You know, one of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And we both, and I kept the conversation going.
Yeah.
Because I said, look, I said to myself, we both come from different perspectives philosophically, maybe politically and so forth, okay? But what I began to realize was that once he began to see that we did have some issues that we needed to deal with, and when I say we, I'm talking about the country, we agreed on the issue, but not necessarily on the solution, but that was okay.
Yeah.
Because we both recognized, oh, hey, there's this challenge over here we need to deal with. Okay.
Yeah.
And we weren't trying to solve the problem. That was not the point of the conversation. And so by the time we got to 1 a.m., it was like 3 different issues we recognized together, even though we didn't come up with the same direction of solution. We both recognized, yeah, these are things that need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And I also had already made the commitment beforehand that it didn't make any difference where this conversation went. He was still my brother.
Yeah, of course.
We were still we were still siblings. We were still both in our own ways experiencing the loss of our sister, as well as the grief our other 3 sisters were experiencing and the reason why I bring this up this way is because the 4 of them, for the first, and I'll say for my sister, my eldest sister who died at 65, was there until her 21st birthday, at the very least, or 21, before she went off and got married and started her own family.
Yeah.
They all lived in the same room, which was not bigger than 10 by 10. We lived in a house that maybe was 12 or 1,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. Now,
Wow.
and we all survived. Okay.
Yay! Congratulations.
But they had a bond that my brother and I could not really relate to in the same way that maybe he and I, we sort of but he and I kind of went off in our own directions as we got older into later years of grade school and high school and so forth. But my sisters, they maintained that bond, and they shared that, of course, at the memorial. It's one of those elements that I use to describe my family. Not exactly Norman Rockwell, but darn close. We didn't have those dysfunctional Thanksgiving dinners you see in the movies, okay?
Yeah, congratulations.
Did we have our squabbles? Sure we did.
Yeah.
We had 8 people living in this house, this brick house. But my parents, they gave us something that helped us, and that was that we needed to work through these things.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter whether or not we agreed, but we needed to come to a place where, because my brother and I lived in the same bedroom, my 4 sisters lived in their own bedroom, that it's a lesson from my perspective that our society needs to learn. And it seems to me that that's part of your activism, your sacred activism as a peacemaker or in peacemaking. Wasn't it Gandhi? He said, be the peace or the change. I guess it was more so. It's be the change you want to see. And I know there was great criticism in the 80s and 90s when you'd hear from, I'm going to say the less religious and more spiritually minded people, and I will say the New Age movement, metaphysical and so forth. They wanted peace on earth. And they were criticized by the religious community. I worked for 15 years for a Christian radio station, so I heard all of the criticisms.
Yeah.
These people over here, they want this, and then, forget it, because prophecy says this and prophecy says that. And it's like,
I see.
Why can't we have peace in our time?
Yes.
But I've also learned as a metaphysician, and I'm sure that you will elucidate on this, it isn't going to happen on the outside until it happens on the inside, right?
Yeah. That's a big piece. Yeah.
Is there, I don't want to say, because there is no quick fix. There's never been to anything. But is there a path of maybe a first step that we can take to begin that internal process of finding that peace. There's a phrase that I've heard many times by people when I was going through some challenges not long ago. They said, don't let them take your joy. Well, how about don't let them take your peace? Is there something that we can do to maintain our level of peace? Doesn't mean we won't have emotions. It's not what I'm saying. That we can start to become the peace that we genuinely want to see in
Yeah.
our families, in our communities, our nation, and the world.
Yeah. And yeah, I hear you. And I love the story about your family. So let me add to the thing about the lack of community, because, and this is going to hook into this, answering your question about peace.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that's happened in Westernized society is that there's been a radical sense of separation from the earth, from nature. And the truth is that our Mother Earth loves us generously and abundantly. And there is so much assistance and help from all of nature around us. And if you are alone, I mean, I know a lot of people, they find that when they go out in nature, they'll feel better if they're feeling like they're in a heavy process. But, you can talk to the mountains, you can talk to the waters, you can talk to Mother Earth, you can talk to God, Creator, Spirit, by whatever name you use, Great Mystery. There is a lot of spiritual help for sure. And so that gets into, let me just say that I don't believe peace does not mean the absence of conflict, number one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Peace also doesn't mean the absence of strong feelings, emotions, such as anger, frustration, fear, or love, joy. I mean, the point is that I consider the human experiment to be a very messy endeavor. And I always invoke the fact that the Buddha said, the first noble truth is that by the very nature of living in a physical body, you will feel pain. And what he meant by that is that you're going to stub your toe and jump around and go, owie, owie, owie. He said, we're going to experience the pain of birth, the pain of illness, and the pain of death. But what we don't have to do is to suffer, to add suffering to it. So for me, peace is like a creative dance. Now, as I spent a good 15 to 20 years healing from symptoms of PTSD, depression, and anxiety that all arose from growing up with a very, very narcissistic mother addicted to opioids, who is very, very critical, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, emotionally abusive. And I didn't have a lot of peace, because when we carry a lot of that kind of unhealed, untransmuted, pain inside of us, it's very hard to find your center, to find what I would call a place of home inside. So the first step is to really begin to become aware of, and to be able to hold a space for acknowledging that pain is inside of us. And then to do the work of what I would say serving it well, because I believe that we are each given, I always say I was given enough adversity, just enough pain and suffering, not enough to kill me, but enough to turn me into the woman that I've become, right?
Mm-hmm.
Into the strong woman that I've become, into the woman who never, for a long time, never had a place of peace and refuge within myself. And now I do. What does that mean? That means when challenging processes arise in my life, or I am feeling hooked into overweening anger, I move through it much more quickly. Yeah. And so your family is a great example of how do you have that intention to have a connection with one another, to have supportive relationships, but not without the absence of conflict, because you have a strong intention to keep a kind of equilibrium, you might call it, or peace, to work it through. Right. And that's what we need. We need news. I think that we haven't been taught in westernized society how to do that. And lucky you that you were taught to do that. Yes. So that's the place to start, the inner work.
What's interesting too, I cannot recall a time when I ever saw my parents fight with each other or really get into I don't want to say never a knockdown drag out, but argument. Now, they were quite the disciplinarians, and appropriately so for the six of us, especially my brother and me, and I'm not saying that we necessarily did or didn't deserve it. It's just, that's just the way it was, ladies and gentlemen, okay? And I don't blame my parents for anything. I am the way that I am today, either because of or in spite of my parents. It doesn't matter either way. I'm responsible today at 61 years of age for who I am, okay? So I don't blame anybody. The bullies in school, my parents, or anybody else for that matter. A matter of fact, I would have to say maybe that I'm actually grateful to the bullies for what they did when I was growing up, because it showed me something that I also uttered shortly after the 2016 presidential election, where I said, "Thank you, teacher." And I want to tell you, that word teacher, that was hard to say. So hard to say. But I knew I had to say it out loud, and I did. Thank you, teacher, for teaching me how not to behave.
Right.
And so forth. We're talking with Rachel Mann, PhD, Dr. Rachel Mann. We are talking here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is really a pleasure to have our I would say now a good friend, only after less than an hour's conversation here, talking. I believe that we met through the website LinkedIn. I believe we connected in that respect.
Yeah.
And I find that I'm finding a lot of people on that website who are very interested in making a difference in the world. Now, there will be those who will say that, that website is, for, seeking out jobs and this and that and the other. I absolutely love the animal rescue videos. I love the kindness videos, one human being to another. I love the quotes that people post. Not a fan of the religious doctrine and dogma posts. Not a fan, because I don't think it's appropriate. But, if they post them, I'm not going to. And I tell you, there was a time when I would report what I thought were infractions that they had no place. Political commentary. And I would not only submit to have them removed, I would no longer follow this person. I would no longer be linked to them, because I didn't find that was appropriate for this particular website. And then I thought, you know what? Why am I wasting my energy? Just unfollow if that's what you feel, and then move on. And that's what I did. And I absolutely love, and there are many people who are on LinkedIn who I've had as guests, but not because I met them through LinkedIn. I knew them years before. I've had them on this program talking about the work that they are doing, and that's what we have here with you, talking about the work that you are doing. How long, if there is a specific moment in time, that you can tell us, how long have you been practicing shamanism, but also, something tells me these go hand in hand, practicing sacred activism?
Yeah. So Well, absolutely. As I said earlier, my concern about people hurting, basically, right? Hurting from all kinds of violence or abuse. I mean, that goes back to childhood, right? So, and I feel that really looking back on the 6 decades of my life, I feel like that I was always connected to the sacred, to a spiritual view that is all about compassion and love and healing, and that is a form of sacred activism. My interest, or how I segued into actually becoming an energy healer. So I had an academic career, as I said earlier. I got my degrees, and the Cold War ended, and I married a native Virginian. I got my degree, my graduate degrees at the University of Virginia. And while doing those degrees, I met a man living here locally, and we got married. And so I ended up staying in the Charlottesville area in Central Virginia. And I had actually sort of a second career, because the Cold War ended and I wanted to really diversify what I did. And I was still very committed to academia. And I ended up getting, kind of by virtue of some synchronicities, into administration in the integration of digital technologies into teaching. And so I did that for 15 years. But what eventually happened while I was doing that, I was healing, as I said, my own wounds, and doing spiritual study with a variety of Native American teachers, and doing a lot of scholarly research on interdisciplinary perspectives on violence, trauma, healing, and spirituality, indigenous spirituality. And what was beginning to happen, I was also developing courses that I was teaching, because I left UVA when I finished my PhD. I had another job in another state university, an hour from Charlottesville. And then I got a job back at UVA 5 years later. So I developed courses and taught them for many years at UVA on topics such as Gandhi and the Native American Peacekeepers, story and healing. And all of them were dealing in some way, not only with critical issues like racism and ending violence and peace, but they were also bringing a spiritual way. I was teaching students how to meditate. I was adapting ceremonies from shamanic practices and Native American practices, and using them to build a sense of community and compassion and connection between students, so that they could begin to work together. And eventually, a series of events that included a medical crisis, the death of a cat, my beloved cat, and a problematic situation with an employee at work, all came to a head. And let's just say that the spirits came to me and said, you know what you're meant to do, and you're not doing it, and you know you need to leave your career and become a healer. And so I went and got training with a man named Alberto Vioto. He's got one of the biggest shamanic training schools in the Western world. And I hung up my shingle as a shamanic healer and started teaching classes. So that's how, but in the meantime, I continued to teach in academia and develop courses around the topics of peace building and so on. So does that answer your question? I think, but all of these three streams, it's all together.
Right.
And I really want to give a plug for shamanic energy medicine. I really, really do.
Well, let's talk about that more as we continue here. We're talking with Dr. Rachel Mann. RachelMannPhD.com is the website. We will be linked to her website so that you can find out more about the work that she's doing. As we continue here on Tell Me Your Story, I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank all of you for staying with us here on the program. I firmly believe, Rachel, that the people who need to and want to hear what you have to say, they're listening. Those who don't need nor don't want to hear, they're not listening, and that's okay.
Right.
That's fine. That's just the way that it is. I still remember, and this applies to what you do. A question was asked. Well, I used to do these programs live, and we would take phone calls on a particular program where I had my Vedic astrologer friend David Hawthorne on. I've known him for, I don't know, 25, 30 years maybe. And he was on the line, and what you do is you'd call in, and we'd put you on. Okay, we need your name, obviously, your birthplace, your birth date, and your birth time. And this one gentleman called up and basically challenged my friend David and said, "How do you know that this works?" And he says, I've never been asked that question, but I can answer the question quite simply.
Yeah.
It just does.
Yeah.
Now, with Chinese medicine, that's 5,000 plus years old, right? They had no FDA. They just knew that it works. Is that the way it is with you and the various modalities of healing that you utilize in your practice, that you just know that it works?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know what? One thing I want to add to your question to me about what does it mean to be a sacred activist? You, Richard, are a sacred activist.
Oh.
By doing this show and showing your heart and wanting to help the world get better and heal, that is an act of sacred activism, as far as I'm concerned. And the medium that you do it through is through your radio show and showing up. I mean, with your great heart and your great presence, caring presence. So that just came to me. So I'm going to address your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So how do I know it works? Well, number one, during my own long healing journey, as I said, from symptoms of PTSD, I actually enlisted and worked in a lot of different modalities. So I did Jungian psychoanalysis. I worked with some therapists doing talk therapy, just developing greater insight. I worked with a therapist who was trauma informed, and I discovered energy healing work when I was about 32 years old. And I was in a very, very difficult situation at work with my difficult mother. And I saw a little flyer for, somatic emotional release, something about energy work. And I took that little phone number tab and I called the number. And the next thing you know, I was in her healing space. She had me fully clothed on a massage table with her hands just lightly over, just on my body. And what I will tell you is an amazing thing happened during that session, which is also relevant to peacemaking. But when I got up from the table, I had developed severe, intense chronic pain throughout my back and my shoulders and my neck. I was completely free from pain. I was completely free of depression and anxiety, and something powerful and profound had happened. So that's my first testimony, my personal testimony. And I called her and I said, I want to learn everything you know, everything you do. And then I continued to work with her, and then eventually found my way to somebody who is a shamanic healer, meaning that she was trained in a kind of energy healing adapted from the native peoples of Central and South America. And what I would say from my personal experience is that all the talk therapy in the world, I really got a lot out of talk therapy, out of mainstream psychology, psychotherapy, but energy healing, absolutely, and shamanic energy medicine absolutely put, what is it called, pedal to the metal, or the rubber on the road. Mm-hmm. Now, what I will say two things. One is about scientific research and shamanic practices and its effects on people's physical, psychological well-being. But I will also say that over the 16 years that I've been working with clients, working with healing clients, and we're talking about 2,000 plus clients, right? and I'm not saying that all of them walked away like kicking up their heels and like, I'm completely cured and healed and everything like that. But I would say that the majority of them, you know, actually emerged feeling tremendously changed, feeling like certain burdens they had always carried or blocks they had always had were lifted. Some of them, it required intensive work, many sessions over time. I had one woman who came to me for a healing, and, you know, I gave it to her. And then 5 years later, she came back to me and said that one healing completely changed my life for the better. Now, there are some scientific studies about shamanic practices and healing. And what they have shown is that, yes, in terms of double-blind studies, there can be a shift in people either. So one was the study of temporomandibular TMJ pain. And they found that the shamanic healing practices that they used, I don't remember right now off the cuff, did actually help people. There have been studies of shamanic practices helping people with addictions and helping them end their addictions. So there's an emerging body of scientific research. And I am an academic. I'm a social scientist. I'm trained as an anthropologist, an historian, a sociologist, and so on. And I'm not just, I have to satisfy my mind as much as I have to satisfy my heart. Right? I always say to people who look at me and think like, well, God, you must be kind of, I don't know, airy-fairy or whatever. And I'm like, why would a woman as smart as me, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be arrogant, but you know me, my academic training and research and, my mind, and why would I just fling myself into something willy-nilly without having like tested it against my rational mind and researched it? That's my answer. I know I go on and on, Richard. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's what the program is.
You put like a quarter in me and I could go on.
Got a lot of quarters.
Yeah.
It to me is very interesting. We're talking with Dr. Rachel Mann. RachelMannPhD.com is the website. We certainly hope that you will go to her website. We will be linked to her website on the podcasts as well as the video casts. And to that end, I want to remind you that we are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m. And we are also here on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. for a special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And we stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. The podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And as I said, we're also on YouTube where you can watch these videos. And we hope that you'll subscribe, because when you do subscribe to a podcast, that means that every time a new interview, a new podcast or videocast is posted by yours truly, you are notified that it's put up there. And that's the advantage. It's not about me collecting email addresses and sending you stuff. No, I don't have the time to do that. I don't have a staff. I'm it. So know that the only thing that subscription will do is notify you that a new interview is placed on the SoundCloud or the YouTube site for you to listen to or watch. So I hope that you will do that. Letting you know also that via the SoundCloud analytics, or the numbers crunching, if you will, 82,500 listens in a little over 4 years, ladies and gentlemen. And that, I think, is pretty astounding. It's pretty cool. I like the number. Works for me. I'm excited because I know we're going to hit 90 and then we're going to hit 100,000. So, hey, help us out by telling your friends, your family, send links and all that good stuff. Repost. I appreciate those who repost the podcasts as well. So thank you for doing that. And if these programs resonate with you and you like what we're doing here and you'd like to help us out financially, we have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. And all you have to do is go to our website, richarddugan.com. there is a link on the home page. You just go down there to donate. Boom, it takes you right where you need to be to send us a support contribution of any amount. We will take energetic support as well, folks. I'm not picky, all right? Yeah, cash is great, but you know what? Sometimes the energy is certainly well used, whether it's doing these programs or seeking out other guests, or sometimes just using that energy to spend time when we are in the decade of perfect vision to listen to that still small voice. And we're going to talk about that more with Rachel Mann here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I really do appreciate Rachel Mann being with us. Dr. Rachel Mann. Rachel Mann PhD is the website. Rachel, I want to ask you, because you've touched upon it a number of times, and now we're going to dive deep into it, into our inner lives, yours and mine. We promote regularly on this program about people going within and listening to that still small voice. How important is that for your practice, especially when working with people? And I think this is the right word to use, being the facilitator of the individual's healing. Because a person could come to you and say, I want you to heal me, but they could be resistant regardless. I mean, internally, they might be resistant for a lot of reasons. And I'm sure that your intuition probably picks up on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, so all of the inner work I've done, and I'm not saying it's finished. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still working on things in myself.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm noticing, being curious about when things come up that feel a little difficult, or when something within is calling for attention. So let me answer your question in terms of when people come to me for healing. Now, it absolutely certainly is true that, so I'll say this, there's a wonderful book that I recommend to everybody. It's a classic in the literature about Native American shamans, medicine people, healers. It's called, it's by Thomas Males. It's basically his storytelling about his conversation with a very revered, wise Lakota Sioux holy man named Fool's Crow. It's actually called Fool's Crow, Wisdom and Power. And one of the things that Fool's Crow says in that book is that a person who comes for the healing has to absolutely believe in the healing, right? So there's a co-creation between the person coming for help and then the healer's role in bringing help. And certainly people can come, I've had clients come to me, over the years, and they want the healing, but because of how they're wired, because of the way they've survived, there can be resistances, no doubt. And I have ways of working with them over that. And the truth is that when somebody reaches out, that's the first step. That activates what I call the natural pathways of transformation within somebody. Now, when they can bring their own insight into the process, and then they can go from the healing, and I often will give them homework, right? Small ceremonies to do, or affirmations to say, or a meditation practice to do. Absolutely, it certainly does help, because then they are actually showing, they are actually stepping into the process and serving the process. And that's going to amplify the effectiveness of the work. So we have to be doing our own inner work. And what that means for every individual is going to be very different in terms of where they are in healing their trauma. how much self-awareness they may have. And we're all growing in self-awareness, no doubt. We're all growing to becoming more and more expanded in our awareness, not just of self and inner self, but our awareness of the greater, beautiful vibrational matrix of creation that we live in. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. It does
Yeah.
indeed. Rachel Mann is my guest, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are diving deeper and deeper into this. I want to ask you in regards to the healing. I'm
Yeah.
a Reiki Master.
Yeah.
I was trained that the energies that I allow to go through my conduit, my body, my physical, spiritual,
Yes.
I don't control. Not
Right.
Not in the sense that when I was working for the Christian radio station, we would have prayer programs. People would call in and ask for prayer for this, that, or the other thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
people would pray for those things for their quote unquote healing. But with Reiki, that isn't how it works. You
Yes.
send that energy to the individual, whether they be there
Yes.
present or absentee, to let them use it the way they want. I had an uncle. My father's brother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. My wife and I decided we're going to send him an absentee healing. They gave us his photograph. We did an absentee healing. After his funeral, my mother told us what had happened. She told me that he got very angry shortly after, because they knew when we had done the absentee healing. Shortly after, threw his medication across the room against the wall, got in his wheelchair, wheeled across the family's compound or ranch, if you will, to his son's dwelling, where
Yeah.
he, I guess, had a period of closure with his son before he passed away.
Right.
Now, what that example brings that example brings this question.
Yes.
What is healing? Because we sent that for his use. And you could say for his healing. Maybe it's more appropriate to say for him to use in whatever way he chose. So Reiki isn't necessarily, in this instance, energy isn't necessarily for the quote unquote healing of, but for the use by the receiver.
Right.
So how do we then define healing? Because if we want them to be healed of that cancer, wait a minute, but that's maybe not what they want.
Right.
Now we're trying to force our will on them. It's like with
Right.
my sister. She, by the way, she could answer the tough questions. And I asked her point blank, I said, are you ready? Are you ready? And she said yes and no. The no was because of her husband, because she didn't want to leave him behind. But she said,
Right.
otherwise, yes, I'm ready. I'm at peace. And everybody at the memorial said the same thing. Yes, she was at peace with it all. So how do we define healing with all of that? I mean, just that's a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Reiki is a beautiful, beautiful healing practice. I have been a recipient of powerful Reiki healing sessions. It is a little different from the kind of energy healing I do. I would say that the kind of energy healing I do is that I track or I follow the energy cords that appear out of whatever the heavy process is into being able to see the deeper wounds that are there that are ready to be transmuted or healed or extracted. And then I do what are called soul retrievals, because whenever we remove something, like we extract the wound, there's, it has fulfilled a role within for that person and their soul's evolution. And we need to bring back, more positive aspects of self or spiritual gifts or archetypal gifts that will then help them continue, as you said, to use this energy to manifest whatever it is needed in their lives. So one thing I will say is that there is always a great mystery about a person's journey. why they came here, why they incarnated, why they chose the particular experiences on what I'm saying is on a soul level, why they've encountered certain experiences, whether it's illness or family conflict or accident or whatever it is, loneliness, feelings of unexplained feelings of loneliness. And that at that level there, we can't just be deterministic about it. We can't just say, okay, I'm going to send you healing energy and have you be cured from cancer. Because we don't know what the soul's deeper purpose is for having that illness. I mean, in the story that you just told, it could very well be that your uncle, that in fact, that illness brought him to that point with the help of the Reiki you sent him in order to have this healing reconciliation with his son. But we don't know. I'm not saying that that's
right.
I also don't want to make it out like, well, we get sick because, there's a new age kind of thing, like you create your own reality. And if you get cancer, well, that means that, you, I don't know, did something wrong in another life, or that you're filled with anger and I throw all that out. I'm just,
right.
We don't know.
Right. We don't. We don't.
And in the sense, having said that, absolutely, when someone comes to me for an energy healing, I do the work that I do. I track the energies, the images, the feelings, the sensations. I call in all the spiritual help that is there for me, for the client. And I do my part, which is channeling. Yeah. Which is channeling, holding space, channeling energy.
Yeah.
And then they are released into the world. And who knows?
Yeah.
Right. I've had clients come to me who have chronic physical illness, who have cancer. And some of them have gotten some relief from the condition, and some of them have not. But then it's turned out that the healing ended up helping them, like you said, with your uncle in some other way.
Yeah. It's to me, the whole aspect of healing. I had an experience I'll share with you. Our listeners who have listened for a while know of this story as well, where I was at the Christian radio station. I was working. These evangelists, these ministers came in to do a program, and they wanted to lay hands on me to heal my eyes. I was born legally blind, and I said no. I said, I'm not here to get healed. I am here to do the work for you that I am doing. Now, I can't stop you from praying for me. And I wasn't trying to be arrogant necessarily, but I was trying to make the point that my purpose in life was not to have my vision healed, because I was doing the work that I was doing with the vision that I had. I was fine. Okay.
Yeah.
But like I said, I can't stop you from praying for me, but no, I would appreciate it if you did not lay hands on me. And of course, I went until I was 35, and my vision started to decline in my right eye. Went to my ophthalmologist. He says, well, it's the cataracts. They're growing. We could wait and see if they go away, which I kind of think he was being facetious. Or we could do a lens implant, but there is a 50-50 chance you could lose your vision. I said, then let's move on it and do it, because if I lose my vision, I want to start adjusting now. I had basically, up to that point, been trying to get a license just to drive a moped. And they just wouldn't do it. I didn't even know about the medical review program here in California, or in Arizona for that matter. And so I threw up my hands up, forget it. You know what? If I'm bicycling at the age of 65, great, then I'm going to be really healthy, and I'll be outside and outdoors and doing. It's fine. I basically made peace with that. I let it go.
Yeah.
And then technology caught up with me, and boom, and now I'm driving a truck. So,
well, congratulations.
I still firmly believe that. Now, there's another aspect of this too, and I haven't really looked into this, and I want to get your insight on this from a metaphysical perspective. A year ago, almost a year ago, I should say, in July of 2021, I had this pain in my chest, right below my sternum. I didn't know what I thought it was. I had just had lunch. Ah, it's got to be indigestion. It'll be all right, you know. Didn't go away. Didn't go away. That evening we're having dinner, and yeah, it's still there. Not any worse than it was, but it didn't go away. Didn't. 10 o'clock rolls around. No, we're going to the ER. She says. Off we went, and the Olympics were taking place around that time, and I had surgery on a Thursday. And I would tell people, yeah, I just participated in the new Olympic sport, and I won a gold medal in the gallbladder clean and jerk because my gallbladder was infected and had a golf ball size gallstone. What I find fascinating is the metaphysical descriptions of the different organs of the body and what emotions they are tied to in particular, like the gallbladder and the liver, I understand, have to do with anger.
Okay.
And I've described my pre and post-operative angry phases. I used to, I would knock something over. After it was, and I was not controlling it. It's just what happened. It was really kind of, I didn't even notice until like the third or fourth day that I was doing that. It was really very interesting. So I have to wonder too that, all right, you say cancer. Let's just use that as the example, like with my uncle. All right, we don't know why, per se, but there's a reason why he chose to have it.
Right.
I know that sounds strange to a lot of people. I had an infected gallbladder,
Yeah.
all right, and a gallstone. I chose to have that. I haven't really figured out exactly why. All I know is I'm glad it's gone, not because of the pain, but because of the metaphysical, maybe metaphorical, aspects of the contributions of anger in me.
Yeah.
Have actually diminished considerably.
Yeah.
What about that aspect of the healing process in terms of the client, not patient, but the client, your client, understanding, if that's even part of the process, why they have manifested this, as to then, of course, why they're there with you to, so to speak, unmanifest it or fix it or what have you. Is that part of the process too, of the person understanding the reason why they chose this? Because, there is a certain reality to the fact that we do create our own reality. We make choices, and it puts us where we are. I mean, I made choices as a kid, believe it or not, just as you did, that brought you and me right here, right now.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. Wow. You ask great questions, Richard. Deep dive. Okay. So, my wheelhouse is not to, I don't know what certain illnesses supposedly mean. If we were to open up like some kind of metaphysical encyclopedia of what it means to have, gallbladder disease or cancer. What I would say is that we have an energy field around us that, following in the footsteps of one of my teachers, Alberto Villoldo, I call the light body, right? We have an aura. It's an energy body that interpenetrates into the physical garment. And that many physical illnesses, before they manifest in the physical, can be seen, felt in the energy body. And they can be a result of a multiplicity of things. In other words, they could be a result of, again, some childhood trauma that hasn't gotten resolved or healed. They could be a result of some soul imprint of what, in terms of that person's destiny line, might manifest if they make certain choices or go in a certain direction. So illness, in some respects, in energy healing circles, is said to originate energetically before it manifests physically. Now, I'm going to amend that a little bit to say that, so that is not to say, so it can mean that I could read in somebody's energy body that there is some potentiality for a particular physical imbalance to happen. Again, that's not particularly in my wheelhouse. But for instance, my teacher, Alberto Vioto, talks about that in terms of his healing practice. And I think that I got into terrible chronic pain, as I said, in my early 30s. And it is because of that physical pain that I had for 15 years that it led me deeper into myself, because I wanted to be free from that pain. I didn't want to live in physical pain for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and I sought out body workers, massage therapists, acupuncturists. I did a lot of energy work that ended up showing me how different holding patterns, traumas, and how they'd impact my energy field, how they'd impacted therefore my physical garment, my mind, my emotions, had manifested in this cluster, this, kind of cluster, I won't say the second word, of physical pain.
Yes, I know.
I don't know how body your listeners are. So I would say that, yeah, I think any experience in our life, whether it's an illness or some kind of pain, whether it's trauma that we experience, we can serve it and look deeper into it in order to know more about self and then to understand more about why we're here, in order to, it could even be, like you said, that you needed to have this big shift in this pattern of anger. And so your gallbladder took it on.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctors who were involved in the surgery were part of the team that were called in on a soul level to help you with this. I mean, again, it's in the great mystery. And so I don't want to say that there's one particular answer in terms of illness, but also, yes, absolutely every experience in our life, we can serve it, of being in service of deepening our self-knowledge, deepening our own healing, really deepening our sense of connection to ourself, our love of ourself, and our ability to be a better person in the world. Yeah.
Well, and that is really where we are coming from, is the fact that we are all trying to come to grips and understand why we're going through the things we're going through.
Right.
I do have to say that on a different metaphysical level, there are certain people that are in our lives at certain times for
Absolutely.
specific reasons. So like you said about the surgical team, they're there to help us learn a particular lesson that we chose to learn. And I have to tell you that my sister, with the stories that I was hearing about the fact that, I mean, I knew that she had a lot of diseases throughout her entire life, starting with asthma. And I can't help but say this. Here's a girl. When I was a kid growing up, here was a girl who had asthma. And what did she do? She took up the French horn. Who does that? Who does?
That's great.
What she shared with us in the latter years of her life, especially at Christmas. I flew back to Phoenix because we all thought this could be our last Christmas as a whole family. And she was so energetic and so, having a great time. I'm thinking, nah, this won't be the last one. There were things I didn't know. But she gave us the most incredible gift you could never wrap. And it was the gift of what I called, and I told my youngest sister who arranged it all. She's just the most amazing woman who, if she had a symphony, she could orchestrate it. She could make it all work together in great harmony. She knows how to put together occasions. And that Christmas to that day was so well orchestrated. And my eldest sister, Jeanette, gave us that gift because she didn't tell anybody about what was really going on. And she didn't show it either. And there was one other lesson that she gave all of us too, that they also shared with me, that in spite of all of the illnesses she had throughout her life, she was never bitter. Never bitter.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. I mean, if anybody had the right to be, she sure did. She wasn't. I loved what her husband said, my brother-in-law said at the ceremony, at the memorial. When she laughed, and she was like this when she was young too, when she laughed, and she had a marvelous laugh, you saw both rows of teeth. That's how big a laugh she had.
Wow.
So those are the kinds of examples, lessons, experiences that this one person, this one, I'm going to say entity who took on physical form as my eldest sister, this lifetime, gave us as part of our learning a lesson, life lesson.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, and we had some great Christmases. I mean, my parents, in spite of the fact that, we weren't rolling in dough, but we were still doing pretty good and all. And they made great Christmas as a kid growing up, but that one's number one right there. And not because after that she passes. No. I was saying that. I was telling my youngest sister about it. I said, you number one, this is the best, just the best. So I think that's one of the things too that I love about this program is each program gets better and better and better. And I look at it as this is Christmas for me. I get to open up a whole new package, a whole new present. I get to explore your world,
Yeah.
A little of mine spills over, but
your mind is great.
It's exciting. It's kind of cool because you've accomplished so much, you've done so much, and I think one of the things that, and I'm curious if you've run into this much, there are people who are around other people all the time, and they're connecting with them, and maybe they're in the medical field, or maybe they're at retail, or whatever it is, and they don't think they're making one difference whatsoever.
Oh.
And yet, the reality is, because my wife is one of these people who works with patients in the cardiology department at Sansum Clinic here in Santa Barbara. And some of them, she's been there 16 years.
Wow.
Even though she has changed different physicians through her time there, some of the patients from the other physicians that she used to see want to see her, if nothing more than to say hello and to thank her for how she took care of maybe the father or the husband that passed on or what have you.
Yeah.
Now, that's an impact.
Yeah.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
So in our final few minutes, share with us why it's important for us to recognize our own importance in this life and to the lives of the people around us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to say your sister sounds like she was wonderful, and absolutely people come into our lives to be our teachers, whether they're doing something so-called negative or positive. So I have a friend and colleague named Chris Adi, as well as his friend. Well, I'm friends with both of them, Mandy Bird, and I'll put a plug in for their book called Tears Are the Source of Your Passion. It's all about the power of grieving to find out who we truly are and what our true authenticity is, and therefore what our passion is and our mission is in the world. And I love their work because it really resonates with mine, and highly recommend their book. They're both brilliant, beautiful, open-hearted, noble-hearted people. I would say that trust the fact that you are here for a reason. Now, I know in the United States that people think that having a mission and purpose means you have to have some kind of big career or write a book or, be on Oprah or be on Richard You know what I mean? Do something big. But the truth is that our service, and this is what I would call sacred activism, like your sister did her sacred activism through that joy she brought. Right? And that really discovering our authenticity. In other words, not what people have told us we should be or we should do, not our conditioning, right? But we find out who we truly are, our joy, what it is that makes us tick. And that out of that authenticity is your purpose. And actually, in the spiritual way that I teach, which includes this beautiful Mesa tradition, this is a Mesa, which is a sacred medicine bundle. One of the things that I teach is that we are in sacred service just by breathing. Our life is an offering. And so I call it now, I've been calling it for years, the breath of love, the breath of light. Because the fact of the matter is that by breathing in, we are being supported by the plant people and the tree people. They are giving us life. And then we breathe out and we are giving life back. And that life in that breath is the most incredible abundance and generosity. So we start there. And then we find what is the keynote of peace. I have a very dear old friend. And I once said to her, I said, you know, your purpose is just to be the big-hearted woman that you are. And to give that big heart to your friends and your family. That's your purpose. It doesn't have to be more than that. And then if you want to write a book or become a therapist or a healer, have a radio show, then great. If that's what gives you joy. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, this life has its experiences. I'm going to put it in that generic term.
Yeah.
It encompasses everything. It has its experiences, and it's how we act, not react, but act in accordance to those experiences.
Yeah.
That helps us to learn the lessons that we need to learn. I know that my sisters and my brother too, although he's the joker in the family, I can't get away with it. My dad came down on me real hard when I was back there because my brother did not return with my mother and I to their condo, and he asked me point blank, says, "Where's your brother Mike?" And I was kidding around. I said, "Well, Dad, we had to sell him to put gas in the car." Oh, he said, "Look, when I ask a question, I want an answer." I said, "I am sorry, I apologize. He's coming home with Cecilia, my other sister." That night, my father came into the living room. I was making up the couch to go to sleep, and he came in and apologized. And I said, "Dad, look, you will always be my father, and I will always love you."
No.
And I got to tell you, he's 90. He'll be 91.
Wow. Wow.
And he obviously uttered those famous words most parents do at this time, that parents aren't supposed to bury their children. And there was nothing I could say to that.
Yeah,
But
of course.
I just told him, I said, "Look, okay, so my brother can get away with it. I can't." Hey, my brother at dinner one time when we were younger, we were sitting there and my dad asked him to go back into the kitchen and get him something. I can't remember when the potatoes or something. And my brother said, I couldn't believe that my dad didn't haul off and smack him. He said, "Well, who broke your legs?" Now, I'm going, wow, hold it. Wait a minute. There's a double standard here. I mean, we were 10 or 12 or maybe 15 or something. But it was like, okay, I need to know my place in this. But my dad is also one who is, he's quick sometimes to take offense because he asked a legitimate question, and maybe I should have just answered him straight, But we were in a kind of interestingly enough, in a rather a happy mood of sorts, trying to enjoy the celebration of my sister's life. And then, of course, he's also very willing to recognize, I crossed a line here,
Oh,
and
that's lovely.
make amends and so forth. And I think that's part of the experiences that we're all going through right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that as you and I are speaking, and according to the latest astrological stuff, Mercury is in retrograde. But one
Yeah.
of my good astrology friends has said, this is not a time to be worried. It's a time to be observant.
Mm,
Be the observer during this time.
yeah.
And that takes the emotion out of it. You just get to, look around.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. This is happening and that's happening.
Yeah.
Okay. And none of it's permanent. That is one of the other keys that I really want to impress upon our listeners and viewers is it doesn't matter what you're going through. It's not permanent.
Yeah. It's not.
Change is the constant of the universe. Rachel Mann, PhD, is my guest, and rachelmannphd.com is the website, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking with Rachel Mann about the work that she does as a shaman and a healer and a sacred activist. I love that, for peacemaking, and we hope we can have you back again to talk further about some other more specific things, if that should be up your alley. We'd love to have you
Love
back
to.
continue this conversation. I invite all of our guests to come back again.
Yeah.
And they're certainly welcome. We'd love to do that. And I have 3 final questions that I want to ask you before we let you go.
Oh my God.
Thank you so much for giving us so much time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great. It's been great. I love you. I love your energy. I love your questions. I love the life your own life, the stories that you shared. I mean, what a great teacher you are.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah. Through your presence.
Before I ask those 3 questions, I need to talk to you, the listener and the viewer. And thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me
Yes,
Your Story.
thank you.
New paradigms for a new world, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And again, we're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and 9 a.m. on Wednesdays for our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. That is Pacific time as well. We're streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com, and the podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we're also on YouTube, where you can watch these interviews. YouTube, and the channel is Tell Me Your Story, Richard Dugan. Just look for the guy with the black hat. We also hope that if this resonates with you, you like the guests we're bringing and the topics we talk about, and you feel led to, please support us financially. We have a PayPal account for your security as well as ours. And also, probably more important than anything else, please spend time in this still, quiet, peaceful place some would call our prayer closet, if you will, and listen to that still, small voice during the decade of perfect vision. And with that, we now move on to our 3 final questions for our special guest here on the program. And the first of those 3 is, who is Rachel Mann?
Okay. I am a sacred activist, social scientist, shamanic healer, spiritual teacher who loves humanity in all of our messiness, and want to support people who want to heal trauma, remove blocks, manifest their highest vision for their life, to be in alignment with their authenticity, their mission and purpose, and to be in service.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
Ever and always, my intention is that when I die, that I leave let's say, a deer path through the woods, because I mean that in the sense that all the people that I've helped, that I've supported, but I leave a deer path of love and peace in my wake. for others and for the planet.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
Oh, my life's purpose is to help heal the world and to create a great wave of peace so that humanity will eventually live in peace at some point.
And
to
we
build
join
that
you in that.
vibrational frequency, with
Absolutely.
others.
Absolutely. Well, we join you in that, and we thank you again for joining us here on the program.
Thank you, Richard.
And we thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast. Love to Lal and Jeanette. I'm listening.